employment law was just, really busy in that period because it was one of those situations where suddenly, every employer in the country was faced with a situation where they couldn't, unless they were exempt, have their staff in the workplace. And then the Labour government at the time had a programme of introducing rights across the board. So from 99, 2000 to about 2005, we had completely new rights. It was amazing, really, that non-discrimination rights didn't exist prior to that in respect of sexual orientation, religion, age. All of those came in, part-time worker rights, enhanced maternity rights. And that period, for the first 5 or 6 years after I qualified, new law all the time. The whole point of employment rights is fundamentally an unequal balance, isn't it? That's the whole point, is to offset the imbalance between employer and employee, as you have in many situations. But the problem's always there to be solved.
Tell me, what one piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Build your network, get your connections. Academics will get you so far, but once you start in any professional area, in a lot of areas, your career develops through contacts. It's one of the reasons why I was able to set up my own firm, was because of those connections that I had built up. So, and you can always offer people something and vice versa.
I believe everyone has a story to tell. Through seeking true, authentic insights about the entrepreneurial journey, I provide a platform for our peers to share their stories and inspire those that listen. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions. Here we are, guest 3 of 24.
Yeah.
Delighted to welcome good friend of mine, Alex Jones, 365 Employment Law. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. Fantastic. Mate. What are you doing over the next 22, 21 hours?
Yeah. We're still going. Let's just put that down there, mate.
Yep.
Just a little bit. Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Thanks.
Mate, it's been a great start and really delighted. Thanks for your support. It's a great service.
No problem.
Mate, we're going to jump straight in. Just tell listeners a little bit about your story and career.
Yeah, so I run a solicitor's firm, 365 Employment Law. Does nothing but employment law. Specialises in employment law across the board for employees and employers. And I'm 20 plus years doing employment law. And I first decided I was interested in law really when I was 16, 17, doing A-levels, went to university, did a law degree. Wasn't really academically right at the top of the tree, but I liked the practicalities of it. And by the time I did my legal practice course, which teaches you about the practice of law, there was this new growing subject, employment law, which hadn't really existed in a specialist sense much before that. It was all quite new, lots of new employment rights coming in. And I thought, well, I quite like this, and I quite liked it because I think, it's practical problem solving. Identify the problem, sort it out, which is I've always saw as one of my strengths. And then I did a training contract, qualified, decided I wanted to specialise. Got my first job in Hove, specialising in employment law with a firm there.
Did you, from growing up, was it always the plan to go into law? Did you want to go into law when you were younger, or?
It was something that I was definitely considering. There's lawyers in the family, and it was something I liked the idea of. Like a lot of people, when you first start doing it, it's academically really challenging, a law degree. But a lot of people as well, and I was definitely one of those, like the idea of things like criminal law. They like the idea of the excitement of it all. And then
my wife's a criminal.
Yeah,
we know, we spoke about it. Yeah. Not the greatest pay, but it's exciting.
Yeah, and but employment law just grabbed me. You do a bit of it when you're doing your degree, but quite historic. And then when you do the practical side on the legal practice course, it was just I just found it so interesting, and I liked the fact that it gave you balance. If you do it, you should act for both sides really, and you get to hear stories from both sides. And then a specialism opportunity came up, and specialised ever since, and various law firms over the years. And then in 2019, I made the call to set up on my own.
So what led you to that? Yeah, like you said, you've been a partner at different firms, haven't you, over the years, 20 odd years of different firms, and like you said, up the ranks and then partner,
Yeah.
etc., etc. So what was it in 20? What got you to that point in 2019? Going, you know what, I'm going to go and do this on my own.
I thought, and I had thought over a couple of years, that it was an area that works best when it's on its own for a whole variety of reasons. You know, if you were setting up a new business from scratch now, you wouldn't put a lot of traditional law areas together. You know, you wouldn't necessarily put private client with family law, with criminal, with corporate. They're all different turnovers, different profit margins, different, insurance, different risk. So I thought, I fancy doing this on my own, because technology was getting better and better. A lot of the technological barriers that I would have had 5 or 6 years earlier just weren't there. Apps were available to run a lot of stuff, voice recognition technology, all of that stuff was available. And I thought, well, now's the time. And I spoke to a couple of people who had made the step themselves, and they encouraged me to do it. And I thought, well, let's go for it. And the thing that was really pushing me towards it was, as an employment lawyer, as a specialist 100% employment lawyer, there's not many of us around, and you get a lot of work referrals. You get it from existing clients and professionals like accountants and people like that, but you get it from other lawyers, and other lawyers are
because
often,
because you specialise in that. There's certain areas that they might have an employment law department, but that's a different level.
Or not do it at all. And
Sure.
when you're in a firm where you specialise in employment law, but they offer the service in other areas that might be competing with those firms, you can struggle to get those complex referrals. So that was something that made me do it, and I thought, give it a go.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then so let's talk. So, because I remember speaking to you before actually you was going to start as well.
Yeah.
You said,
and you were very encouraging, so thank you for that.
I know. But I still remember the lunch and having a conversation and going out with me. Mate, great. I knew you'd smash it as you have done. But 3 months after you start, then obviously there's a global pandemic. I've started my own business, global pandemic. What goes through your head at that point?
Well, the practicalities go through the head, like a lot of people had. The kids are going to be at home. My wife's going to be at home. We're all going to be there trying to work and trying to do everything under one roof, and you can't see clients physically. But employment law was just really busy in that period, because it was one of those situations where suddenly every employer in the country was faced with a situation where they couldn't, unless they were exempt, have their staff in the workplace. What do you do about that? Some businesses, service businesses, the restaurants, the pubs, the hairdressers, they were in real trouble as COVID developed. So whilst it was uncertain, as it was for everyone, it was actually pretty hectic time.
Sure.
Both dealing with all of the issues that came up for existing clients and new clients, both employers and employees, but also adapting as announcements happened. So I can recall having lots of conversations when it was obvious that everything was going to close down, and I had clients contacting me who were saying, well, we know we know the lockdown is coming, we know we're going to be sending our staff home, and we can't afford to pay them, we might need to make them redundant. And then the rumours of support came in, furlough came in, which changed everything. Furlough then adapted, where you could have your staff back on a part-time basis, and it was just a period unlike no other in terms of the type of advice that I was giving.
I guess your advice needs to change, but like the law is what it is. But then with unprecedented things coming in, obviously the law's looked at in different ways, I'm assuming.
Well, the law was the law. I mean, it was a situation where employers had the financial support to be able to pay staff in part, but all of the considerations about whether or not they made them redundant, whether or not they were entitled to come into work, what happened at the end of that period, were they cutting their pay completely? They all applied. So it was an interesting period, and it almost put everything on hold for a bit, not just for me, for lots of businesses. But my firm was fortunate in that period, because it was a busy period, and it was very lean. It's limited amount of IT, small office. It wasn't one of these over leveraged businesses, so it was a interesting period.
Sure. No, I can imagine, like you say, from your point, there's certain industries, certain businesses that started at that point that would have been massively affected and couldn't carry on trading, maybe, and gone, taking the wrong time to
Yeah.
make this plan. Where, like you said, from your point of view, you almost become busier at that point in a way with the amount of people wanting to reach out and look, we started doing a load of stuff together with SBT and some of the advice that you was able to give in a lot of the a lot of the articles that you wrote and keeping people updated within our community on stuff that's going on, which is people needed. And I guess people remember that as well, don't they? Like that period of time, like you reaching out and helping support and with that advice, that people remember that. That obviously holds you in good stead for the business moving forward.
Yeah, definitely.
It's cool. Look, I want to obviously, over 20 years in the legal profession, talk to me a little bit about some of the changes in like employment law over the years. It must have been huge.
Yeah.
And talk to me about that, like how that's changed, but also like with the future, how do you see?
Well, employment law is an interesting one because when I first came into the law and did my training contract in the late 90s, employment rights were pretty limited. You had basic but really financially limited unfair dismissal rights. Discrimination law only applied to sex, race and disability. And then the Labour government at the time had a programme of introducing rights across the board. So from 99, 2000 to about 2005, we had completely new rights. It's amazing really that non-discrimination rights didn't exist prior to that in respect of sexual orientation, religion, age. All of those came in, part-time worker rights, enhanced maternity rights. And that period, for the first 5 or 6 years after I qualified, new law all the time. It then slowed down in terms of new developments. You always get case law interpreting the existing statutes and regulations and everything else. But the speed then slowed down. But what didn't was the pendulum between whether or not rights are going to increase or decrease, and that historically was always a political one. You had the Labour Party essentially was in favour of all of them, and the Conservative Party weren't really in favour of many of them. It became a almost politically toxic position to say that you weren't in favour of them. So by 10 years ago, every party was in favour of them. Every party had a manifesto commitment to protect employment rights, but in different ways. And the way that has changed over the past 10 years or so is we had employment tribunal fees, which was pretty dramatic. 10 years or so ago, the coalition government introduced a fee if you want to issue an employment tribunal claim, which meant that claims dropped off a cliff. Massive reduction statistically in claims brought often by the lower earning employees, and that served in two ways. It meant that actually the more complex claims, which the reality is that's the type that the likes of me would deal with, they got to trial much quicker than they used to. But it meant that lots of people just didn't have the ability or the finances to assert their rights. Then the Supreme Court declared that fee regime illegal, overthrew it. Every single fee that was paid had to be refunded. And then suddenly the claims cranked up again. The issue that we face now in terms of how employment rights have developed and how employment law has developed is it just takes a long time for individuals to assert those rights. From issuing the claim to a final trial on a basic unfair dismissal claim, you're looking at the best part of a year. Years on discrimination claims, and that's the wider issue to do with funding of the justice system and funding of the courts, which I'm sure your wife has talked to you about in terms of criminal justice and access from in that respect. So occasionally there's talk of changing employment rights. There was talk last week that there might be a change in the 48-hour working week. There might be a removal of entitlement to holiday pay. I mean, again, it's a brave political position to suggest that those things would happen because there's almost immediate pushback, and they sort of disappear. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern really at the moment, in that all the rights are there. They're quite hard to assert. They're quite hard to follow through, but eventually you get there. And it's almost a two-tier approach because a lot of employers now have become quite good at keeping staff with incentives, with benefits, and those are the employers that always do better. The employers that treat their staff well, look after them.
Because that leads on, I guess. Ultimately, that's about culture, isn't it? Within a company, definitely. You must talk to so many. Being interested to talk to you about some. Obviously, you clients or people businesses that you spoke to over the years, people that struggle with employment issues, are they ones that you look at and maybe that they've got the culture potentially wrong? Or
well, I mean, you know, I see it from both sides. I see it from the employee side when I bring claims in from the employer side, and I can put the employer clients that I've acted for over the years into two brackets. You know, there are the ones who are always communicating. They always ring you up when there's an issue. They're always contacting you. You know, they always take your advice. Those are the ones who will be much less likely to face a claim, and even if they do face a claim, be much more likely to be able to defend it. And then there's the ones who, despite my best intentions and saying, you know, please call me, please email me, you know, you don't hear from them for 3 years, and then they contact you and say claims dropped in, you know, and you know, you spend much more in the way of legal fees if you do it that way, and you have, you know, much more disrupted workplace. So the ones that, you know, take advice and understand that actually if they treat the staff well, they will do better are the good ones, and particularly the ones that understand that with their staff. You know, incentivize them, you know, listen to them, because often for a lot of employees it's not necessarily about pay, it's about incentives, it's about culture, it's about, you know. So
I completely agree with that, and I think certainly from my, like I said, I talk about culture on the podcast a lot. You know, large organisations, smaller, whatever it looks like. You know, even when I had the salon, I always talk about I've struggled with getting the culture right. I wasn't a hairdresser, so I feel like I've got that wrong. And I guess for me, it's looking at, like you said, how you look after staff. What, especially since lockdown, how many more people have gone, I don't need to work at that place anymore, because they're looking for more purposeful. And it's not necessarily, like you say, about money, but it's about how do they look after me?
Yeah, hybrid working, remote working.
How has that changed? Like, is that from an employment law point of view? Like, what's with hybrid working and stuff like that? Has there been some? I get the feeling there's quite a lot of grey area there. Or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're in the workplace. Doesn't matter where you're working, and a lot of employers don't really seem to understand that. You know, like assessing how safe things like their confidential information is. You know, what about the equipment? Is the person going to get injured? You know, sat uncomfortably at the kitchen table. You know, all of these things. And it was a real shock to everyone, wasn't it? 2 years ago, you know, go home, you know, sat up at the kitchen table, you know, with the family all doing exactly the same, you know, and now it's not like that, but there's not enough staff for jobs, and employers that offer hybrid working get the better staff. And my experience is, particularly over the last 6 months to a year, is employees, particularly senior employees, don't want to be fully in the office, but they also don't want to be fully at home. They like the idea of not having to get on a commute, not having to come in, particularly when you have a lot of remote meetings that you never used to have. But they also like the idea of workplace culture and, you know, meeting their colleagues occasionally and that type of, you know, issue. And
like, what's your take on it? What do you think about that in regards? Because there's a lot of talk around that, about that. A lot of, especially maybe the younger generation, people are learning their skill, whatever that be in the office. If they're not in an office environment, they don't have those water cooler moments or bouncing ideas. Like, you think when you was learning your trade, you know, just done your legal practice course, you're in your first years as a qualified solicitor, bouncing questions off of a partner. Whereas if you're working from home,
it's harder.
You're probably not going to just email that person.
No, I mean, that's invaluable, isn't it? Those office interactions, and you know, some employers recognise that and have things like, you know, in-person team meetings. But often those interactions are informal, aren't they? They're you know, you don't feel, you're not sure about something, you don't feel you can say it in a team meeting, but you'll chat to someone who's a bit more experienced over coffee, or you know, as you say, at the water cooler, and it's not just practical, it's social as well. You know, what did you watch? Cool. Did you watch on TV last night? You know, have you been on holiday yet? And it's harder to have those conversations when you don't have some sort of interaction.
Because there's so much. Then just look, one of our main, I guess, from us county business clubs, one of our main things come about our manifesto thing we've done with Inside Stories is people still buy from people, and that building relationships, and that's what we fundamentally about. And I think we're creatures of that. We need to be around other people and want to thrive. There are some people that you speak to, maybe I don't want to stereotype. You look at maybe in the tech industry, coders and stuff like that. They're okay with going, you know what, I just want to be locked in a room and I'm okay working at home and just doing that. But ultimately, like, look, me and you are both very social people. Go to networking events and out and about. Like, I love being around people and having that thing. And I think that if you go down that particular route where it is more home working and not being in that environment, I think I don't know. I just feel we're missing something.
It's not an either or, though, is it?
That human connection that we crave, I think.
It's not an either or, though, is it?
No.
So, I think the employers that blend that well will be the ones that do well in terms of having staff satisfied, avoiding problems, dealing with problems quickly.
Do you think then that, like, certainly from, I guess, an archaic way of looking at it, like, especially maybe some professional services like law firms or accountants, where they was like, everyone had to be in the office 9 to 5, and then all of a sudden we're going, we've got to change, and they've had to embrace. They was forced to embrace it, wasn't they?
Yeah, some were. Yeah,
and I think that for the better as well in that sense, because you if someone's working for you or working with you, whatever that looks like, and as long as they're doing their job, that they need to be sitting in front of you 9 to 5.
And it's not a 9 to 5 job, never has been, never will be, as a lot of professional service firms are. But it doesn't mean that you have to be physically at your desk the whole time. The performance is often in the results, isn't it?
You must have seen a change in, I guess, from people use it, like from cultures and stuff like that, from COVID. That's changed
definitely,
massively.
Definitely.
The shift has been
definitely, and a lot of employers that seem unable to keep staff or lose a lot of staff are resisting the change.
Sure.
Resisting the change. The ones that are embracing the change and saying, we've got hot desking, or you can come in, we only require you in 2 days a week or 1 day a week, or you can come in the whole time if you want. The flexibility. That's what people want.
That's what I guess you're right. That's what we're in Plus X now, co-working space, which is phenomenal, and we've got various different sizes of businesses here, from Creston Reeves of 40 or 50 staff here, and other people are just, there's 1 or 2 people in the office, and some people co-working. But great spaces to be able to do that, and you still then get that, like, you still get that interaction, don't you?
Definitely.
Although maybe even from a smaller firm point of view, you're able to come in and still build those relationships, I guess, which is where it's key for me. I think that's where there's key. But I mean, tell me then, what like from your point, like with the firm that you've started now, been going since January 2020. What's the plans for the future with it for you?
Well, just continuing to grow it in terms of clients, continuing to get that reach out of the Brighton, Worthing, Sussex area, and potentially expand depending on how that develops. I sort of view that COVID period, which was essentially a whole year and a half, as a bit of a stopgap, and we're really only in proper year 2 now. So and focus over the next 6 months on where that might go.
Okay, that's interesting. What look, talk to me. I guess I'm keen to as well, like the employment, because I guess I sort of struggled a little bit with that at the start with like I say, I always go back to the salon because that was probably one of my biggest learning curves. And I had so many staff. I'm just. It seemed that at the point, because I had like an employment lawyer sort of on tap, and from HR and that side, so it all sort of ties in, and it was really difficult for me because it seemed like the support was so much for the employee as opposed to the employer. That's how I felt when I was there. So, for example, a staff member doesn't come in that day, and then they're and don't phone in, and then just come back and work 2 days later. Okay. So, and then the impact that has on the other staff, they go, well, why is he getting away with that? But the process I had to go through to discipline that person or whatever that is like. To talk, I'm keen to just talk to me a little bit about that.
It's about connection, though, isn't it? Because you need to connect with your client. It might be that sometimes, I would say to someone in that situation, you haven't been there that long, they haven't turned up to work, just deal with it now.
But can
and then at other times, the fundamental right in employment law is the right to claim unfair dismissal, which you get after 2 years qualifying service. qualifying period should probably be less than that. That's quite a long time if you're looking at a balanced argument. But prior to that, as long as there's no other issues, no discrimination, no health and safety issues, no whistleblowing, simply someone hasn't turned up to work and they haven't told you, well, that'd be enough to probably terminate their employment in those situations. So it's about communicating, and it's also about not being afraid of your shadow as well, because you've got to be a bit careful about not doing anything, but you've also got to be a bit careful about going in too hard. And that's why it's not just about rights, it's about communication and engagement. And is there any reason why you're not telling me what you're in, all of those things, and having that friendly person on the end of the phone who you can just say, what do you think about this? Because my role has developed over the years in that, when you first qualify, all the questions are about the law. All the questions are about, well, can we do this? And then time develops and you almost become that sort of trusted advisor. What do you think we should do about this? And you can, the opposition is as a lawyer, you can tell them the options, but you can't decide for them. But you can steer them in direction of what you think is the best option for the business, or if they're an employee bringing a claim, the best option in terms of whether or not they might succeed or whether or not it might settle, and just make yourself available to do that.
That's interesting, because like I said, for me, it always seemed like I couldn't. There was a point where you go, I'd love to have just gone, actually, get your stuff.
You might be able to do that in certain situations, though, mightn't you?
and you can. Because
of course.
Like you said, level of communication. So for me, I guess part of me, first business, quite scared of marriage. I can't say that, or I can't do that. It's not possible to go down that route. They're going to pull. But you're saying that actually, I guess, like you said, the key is having a good advisor.
Absolutely. Because of course, it might be that I say, right, don't do anything. Come and see me. Let's have a Teams meeting as we do now, and let's work out what we want to do. Because of course, there's a whole load of balancing issues there, isn't there? The person might be back; they might actually be quite good at their job. You might think actually they're not up to it, but I haven't got a replacement. It's difficult to get a replacement. If it's going to cost me a lot more money, what whole host of issues that you have to sort of strategically think about.
Ultimately, that's the part of being a business owner and having that responsibility to make those decisions and choose that right path. And it was the thing for me. It was so much surrounded by, because it's exactly that. There was them questions. That particular person I'll talk about was actually really good. And they did actually, when they were there, they made a lot of money. But then the negative impact that has on the business, because when you everyone else is going, well, he's getting away with that. Why are they getting away with that?
It's tough running a service business as well like that, because the customer is front and center, aren't they? And so
my biggest learning for me, I guess, looking at not being a hairdresser was a tough thing for me. The fact that had that happened, I'll just go, well, then clients that he's got a fully booked column on a Saturday, all those clients that are coming in, I'll make sure I do them, and I'll work that out. You wouldn't want me cutting your hair, mate. So people coming in, he's like, I couldn't do that, and you have to then cancel them. You lose your clients, and there's such an impact on the business as well as the other people. So it's for me, there always seemed to be that one, a little bit of a grey area around employment law, and it was always, which listening to you talk was possibly not so much of a grey area. There is actually, you need, but more.
You have to. The whole point of employment rights is it's fundamentally an unequal balance, isn't it? If that's the whole point, is to offset the imbalance between employer and employee, as you have in many situations. If you if you buy a food product and it causes you to get sick, as a consumer, you've got those rights that are there to protect you. And the balance is right. It could arguably go further. If it was clearer from an earlier stage, it might make matters easier. But the problem's always there to be solved. That's
that's the best thing. Listen to that. And actually, it's really interesting. My first talk that I was talking with Matt Hunter, who obviously co-founder of Plus X, and he was talking about innovation and design and stuff like that, but being a problem solver and listen, actually completely different industries and completely different areas. Yet listening to you talk and describe your role, I guess, and part of employment law is just that there's a problem, and so I'm there to try and solve it, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Mate, it's brilliant. Well, look, mate, it's been fascinating. Well, look, we're going to finish as we always do, these quick fire questions I've got for you. So I want to tell me, what one piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Build your network, get your connections. Academics will get you so far, but once you start in any professional area, in a lot of areas, your career develops through contacts. I'm speaking to the converted here, but for example, I got the in on my first training contract through a guy I was at university with. He said, they're looking for someone, go and meet them, and that was someone who I'd met and networked, although I didn't even know what networking was in those days, and the same, because one of the reasons why I was able to set up my own firm was because of those connections that I had built up. So and you can always offer people something, and vice versa.
I love that. You're so right, and definitely for me, as you know, my belief in that, and building your network and the people you surround yourself with is what it opens doors.
Yeah, completely.
So many, and people buy from people. Like,
of course they do.
Whatever, and this is what I find fascinating. Whether it's selling hairdressing services or talking about the law. Magazine advertising, whatever that is, people still, they've got to buy into you as an individual. You've got to build those relationships with people, and that's where I totally agree. Okay, who has been the biggest inspiration throughout your life, and why?
This is a tricky one. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, and there's so many different people that touched my life and done different things, and both in a positive and negative way. And I actually remember a conversation that I had with a law lecturer, maybe first year or second year, and I was at university in London. It was very city driven. It was very, you have to get to X to be able to work in a city law firm. And at the time, some of the academic side was actually quite challenging. Some of the stuff that we were doing, and he said, well, with the academic level that you're at, I'm not sure you're going to end up practicing in law. And at that time, I thought, I walked out of that meeting and I thought, well, you're just wrong on that. It's not just about, it's about, as I say, problem solving. It's about practical solutions. It's everything like that. And that actually gave me a bit of a jump to study harder, to do more, to get over that hurdle, to get to the next hurdle. And it's strange when you think about stuff, how it comes.
That's really interesting. Because again, I was just talking with Jack the Lad was on previously. We was talking about education. We were talking about that he goes into schools to inspire the next generation and stuff like that. And it's unbelievable, really, the impact that teachers, lecturers, whatever that is, can have on individual and children can get labelled from a young age. You're not academic. I was not the most academic person.
See, I was labelled as academic.
And that's the. But I think you can be where from the education system we're so quick to put people in boxes and label them. But the impact that some comments like that can have. It's great to think that in your head you took that on board. Actually, no.
And there's other examples of lecturers and teachers who had the opposite. But it's interesting how some things spur you on and some things don't. And
I love that. What could you recommend? A book or podcast to our listeners that's had an impact on you?
Freakonomics. A book about economics, but from a understanding and practical point of view.
Okay.
So it breaks it how money works down into an everyday. It's a brilliant book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Finally, what is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
Just don't let things worry you. Just try your best. Carry on. Try and keep calm, and eventually you'll find a solution to something or everything.
Love that. Mate, listen, thank you so much for coming on and supporting
No
today
problem.
and coming on and having a chat. And there's some great little insights, and certainly, like I said, for me, employment law was it's very much was a difficult thing, especially from the salon. So it was really interesting to just pick your brains about a couple of them bits. And sure,
delighted to be here. You're not looking too tired yet.
Mate, we're doing all right. You got in early. We done all right. But hopefully, I think you're sticking around for the live show later, which would be awesome. So mate, thanks again.
No worries.
Appreciate it, and look, wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Mate.
Thank you for having me.
And that is a wrap. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions.